But the fact is that human beings have responsibility and choice. So history doesn't happen the way, it's not preordained, because human beings have responsibility. To fulfill God's will requires human beings cooperating, because we've been given that freedom and responsibility. We're not robots or automatons. Human beings can either accomplish or fail a given responsibility at any time in history. When we accomplish God's intention, then what happens? God's will is fulfilled, and history moves one step closer to the restoration of God's ideal. But what happens when human beings fall short? History is prolonged, evil and suffering continues, and someone else will be called to do the same thing later. And that's why you'll see in the final presentation this afternoon that history repeats itself. Because until God's will is fulfilled, there are efforts again and again and again to do it. That's why we see repetition and parallels in human history. So Jesus made it clear that he wanted to be received. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets, stoning those who are sent to you. How often I would have gathered you like a mother hen, but you would not. I wanted to gather you, you refused. Just like you killed the prophets. Same thing, same theme. It's the same unrighteousness. Jesus said, you search the scriptures thinking you'll find life in them, but you refuse to come to me that you might have life. Someone else comes in his own name and you receive him. I come in my Father's name and you reject me. Jesus said, I came to tell you the truth from God. This is the 8th chapter of John. I came to tell you the truth from God, but now you're trying to kill me. This is not what Abraham did. This is not what your father did. Why do you seek to kill me? Does that sound like a question from a man who was coming for the purpose of being rejected and killed? Not at all. And all you have to do is read what's there without prejudice or preconception. Consider this. When Jesus was born, if his mission was to realize the 3 blessings, then his family was first and foremost the most important thing. And yet the problems for Jesus began right there in his early life. You can see much evidence that it was difficult for Jesus' family to understand. It was difficult for Joseph, for example, to love the son that he knew was not his own. At first, he was going to put Mary away quietly until he was told in a dream that everything was okay. But I don't know if you've ever been told something in a dream, it's easy to doubt later. And Joseph had a hard time accepting his son. There were 3 days when Jesus was 12, when he was separated from his parents, and the scripture describes it almost as if they didn't know he was gone. But believe me, before bar mitzvah, a young Jewish man, no mother would not know where her kid is for 3 days. But there was tremendous struggle. And if you look at the Bible, Joseph disappears from the narrative. Never after that time, he's not even there. He's gone completely. There's lots of, he was much older, he might have died. Perhaps they couldn't stay together. There were lots of difficulties. But then Jesus' own mother was told he was crazy. Your son is beside himself. And so she came with Jesus' brothers outside where he was speaking. And someone came in and said to Jesus, your mother and brothers are outside. They were trying to come to get him because they'd been told he was beside himself, speaking crazy things, acting weird. And when Jesus heard that they were outside coming to get him, what did he say? Who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Those who do the will of God, these are my mother and brothers. And he refused to see. There's obviously difficulty there. When Jesus, during the 3 days that he was not with his parents, what was he doing? He didn't go to the lowly people. He didn't go to tax collectors and harlots and fishermen. He went to the religious leaders of Israel, because that's where his message was meant to be received. And it was only after he was thoroughly rejected that he went to the outcast of society. He started at the top. He started with the chief priests to be received. And when he began his mission at age 30, who was the first person he witnessed to? John the Baptist, who was the most significant religious leader in Israel, like Billy Graham of his day. In fact, a revelation had told people that John the Baptist would be the one to point them to the Messiah. And when Jesus came to be baptized by John, John saw the Spirit of God descend like a dove. And he heard a voice from heaven, "This is my beloved Son." And he testified to Jesus. But a few months later, he sent messengers, "Are you really the one, or should we wait for someone else?" And John continued to keep his own disciples. His disciples and Jesus' disciples argued over whose teacher was greater. There are lots of problems there, which I'm not going to take time to go into, but there's much, and it's right there in the scripture, in the historical record. Ultimately, with nowhere else to turn, Jesus went to the outcasts of society. And then he got accused for hanging around with sinners and harlots and drunkards and violating the Sabbath and not respecting the law. And he got lambasted. And if he did a miracle, he was told, they tried to convince people that it was the power of the devil. And finally, in anger, Jesus said to the Pharisees, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, because you shut the kingdom of heaven against men. You neither go in yourselves, and you don't allow anyone else to go in. Oh, you search land and sea to convert one person, but every person you convert, you make twice the child of hell that you are." That's what Jesus said. Had Jesus been able to stand on a foundation of support, had the priests or John the Baptist, had they fully testified to Jesus, and Israel been able to accept, it's no accident that Israel was part of the Roman Empire. And it would have been through the Roman Empire that Jesus could bring his teaching and tradition to the world. This axial period was an incredible time, and the Roman Empire was at its most vast, a foundation for Jesus to travel to the world, to travel to India or China or Africa, to the people who'd been prepared through their various religious teachers. But tragically, because of rejection, because of faithlessness, Jesus took responsibility himself and paid the price himself and sacrificed himself lovingly for his enemy, overcame the power of evil through sacrificial love. And Jesus' last words, they don't know what they're doing. They don't realize what they're doing. Forgive them. They don't recognize the mistake they're making. How else can you interpret that? You know, if Jesus came for the purpose of going to the cross, then Judas should be a hero. Judas who betrayed. But what did Jesus say about Judas? Woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for him if he'd never been born. Now, if he's doing what was supposed to happen, how could he be cursed for that? That just doesn't make sense. The next last words Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why must I go this way?" And there's many more details that, had I time, I would go into. And his final words, "Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit." His physical mission ended, his body broken, his physical presence on earth gone. But into thy hands I commend my spirit. There's much depth and detail that we don't have time to go into. And the cross ended the 2,000 years of preparation. And what I'm sharing is just the tip of the iceberg. We can go into much more depth and detail about the purpose of Jesus' mission, the significance of the cross and Jesus' sacrifice, and the significance of John the Baptist's role in preparing the way, and what happened, what went wrong. What is the power of one? All throughout human history, at significant times, in particular important moments, God has called and raised particular people to transform the world, to make a difference, to change people's lives, to move history closer to God's ideal and will. This is a consistent principle historically. In our final presentation this afternoon, after a break, we're going to look at the patterns, the parallels, the repetition of history, and some basic understanding of the meaning of the time we're living in. But as we take a break, I want to ask you to think about, reflect about this. What can we learn today from history's mistakes? What can we learn from the life of Jesus? And I also want to ask you, what do you think would happen if Jesus came into the world today? What would you do? Now, some of you might say, oh, easy. You know, he's going to come on the sky and appear in the clouds and everybody's going to recognize him. But that's what they expected 2,000 years ago. Did you know that? They even said to Jesus, how could this man be anything? When the Messiah comes, everyone will see him and nobody knows where this guy came from.